A very warm welcome to everyone to today's Stimulation Talk, also known as S-Talk. It's about stimulation in life, in leadership and in business. And I'm very happy, very proud that we have a fantastic guest today with us today, Tony Hsieh. Thanks for being with us, Tony.
Thanks for having me.
Great pleasure. And for the ones of you who don't know Tony, I'm not sure if there are many, but a quick background information on Tony. Tony is the CEO of the online retail and tech company Zappos. He's an entrepreneur, he's a venture capitalist, and he's also very much engaged in thinking about the social environment, the social future and human nature. He's a best-selling New York Times author, so please read his book, Delivering Happiness. Gives you a great overview about his thinking, and he's a great guy, so I'm super pleased having the opportunity today talking to you, Tony.
Well, thanks for having me.
So let me start with one question. I know it's a very broad question, but it's the question I love to ask people at the very beginning. How's life? How are things for you?
It's fun. I've been living downtown now for, I don't even know how long, I'm going to guess 6 or 7 years, and it's a lot of fun just living in an area that's constantly evolving, and some of it is because of other businesses that I'm not involved with and showing up and doing interesting things, and some of it is because of people I know and friends that are doing interesting things, and then some of it, there's parts that I've had some involvement in, and so I think just that ongoing energy and seeing the creativity and seeing the art and just the evolution of the whole places, it's just a fun place to live.
So you moved downtown, Tony, about 6-7 years ago, you said. What was the driving factor for you moving downtown? I've understood it's an area of Las Vegas no one wanted to move. So why was it that you decided to move here?
I wouldn't say it's that no one wanted to move here. Even when 6 or 7 years ago, there was definitely not as much to do around downtown. There were maybe, I think, 2 or 3 bars, and that was pretty much it when I first moved down here. But the vibe of downtown, the culture of downtown was already here, and I've lived in a lot of places, including growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I've actually never lived in a place that was as community focused as downtown Vegas. And so it just seemed like a magical coincidence that the downtown area in Las Vegas is actually just a few blocks from what is now our current headquarters for Zappos, because there's a lot of complementary attitudes and vibes between the two. And
so I've understood with the downtown project, and we're going to talk later a little bit more detail about it. It's one of your key projects. What would be, besides Zappos, what are some other initiatives you're working currently on, or other things you're currently thinking about?
Yeah, so specifically right outside this window behind me is a project called Ferguson's. So you can go to fergusonsdowntown.com and you'll see I've been living out of an Airstream, and there's other tiny houses and also renovated hotel units, and over time we'll be adding units available to the public, as well as public green space and retail shops and restaurants and so on. And so I'm pretty excited about both living here and also just being involved in that development. So that's kind of the latest focus in terms of what I'm specifically personally working on.
It must always, I mean, at least this morning when I was walking around, I saw your downtown projects, then Zappos being close by. It's probably almost, at least for me, it would be like a dream becoming reality, having everything so close together.
Yeah, one of the goals is to have everything you need to live, work, play within walking distance. So I love that, being able to walk everywhere, and then also just walking down the sidewalk, you're likely to run into people you know, or going to the local bar or restaurant, same type of thing, and you'll be here over the next couple of days, and so I think you'll get to experience some of that, and maybe you can even get some video of the market in the alley, for example, or show them what the front of Ferguson's looks like with the big rig jig sculpture.
Yeah. And do many employees of Zappos also live here?
In the downtown area, there's some, but I'd say it's mostly actually not non-Zappos employees that live in the area.
And talking a little bit about Zappos, I mean, you've been now the CEO for 18 years.
We've been around a long time.
Incredibly long time. I would not say that's probably not the average tenure of the average CEO, but so are you certainly not the average CEO. After 18 years, I mean, what do you do as a CEO still? You know probably everything inside out, the team knows you. So how would your day look like?
Yeah, so I think what I like about my job is that it's constantly changing, and so what I'm doing today is completely different from what I was doing 5 years ago, which is completely different from 5 years before that. And little bit of a secret is that I actually don't care about shoes at all. I basically wear essentially the same outfit or shoes every day. And what got me interested in Zappos originally was I'm super passionate about company culture and customer service, and so those are all things that we over time have kind of infused into the Zappos brand and what Zappos is all about. And with the move downtown, now we're becoming much more involved with the community, and so that's another layer of where we want the Zappos brand to be. And I'm hoping 10-20 years from now people won't even realize Zappos started out in shoes, and I'm imagining hundreds of businesses, somewhat analogous to Virgin, where they started out in music, but now Virgin has hotels and airlines and other types of businesses as well. So really having each of those businesses under the Zappos brand be about the very best customer service and customer experience. And so for me, it's not just, I would have left long ago if we were only about shoes, but it's because we're about so much more, and what that means and how that manifests itself, that's what keeps me here, and it's exciting to be part of it.
And I was reading in your book that with your first business, with Link Exchange, you sold it already after 2 years for 265 million to Microsoft, and that it was so bloody hard for you at the end to get up in the morning to motivate yourself, so you looked for excuses why you should not go to work.
Yeah.
So now you're down the road 18 years. So how is it for you waking up in the morning? Is it like you wake up and say, yo, Zappos day, let's go to work? Or do you also have the days where you say, I rather would not like to go to work today?
I think what I like is every day is different, and so I've actually structured my days. So my mornings, I'm just by myself, and just that's kind of my focus time to respond to emails and concentrate on stuff without interruptions or distractions. And then in the afternoon is generally where I go to the office or go to meetings, and then in the early evenings you usually start having my meetings out around in the downtown area, and then those meetings run until late night sometimes. Last night, for example, my last meeting ended at 9 p.m. and so I like having that variety in the different environments, and so I think for me, I like just the different contexts and environments in which I get to work, and it's not just doing the same. It's not just sitting in an office cubicle for 12 hours.
And this variety and this change, and you also mentioned the importance of culture as a success factor of Zappos. What makes this culture so unique? What are the main characteristics?
Well, I think every company culture is probably unique in its own way, but for us, we formalized the definition of our culture into 10 core values, and so I think it's those values that are unique to us, and but a big part of it is we really, a lot of companies talk about work-life separation or work-life balance, whereas we really focus on work-life integration. We want you to be the same person, whether you're in the office with coworkers or out at night with friends. It really should all be the same thing. And the good thing is, if we hire people and our strategy is to hire people whose personal values match the corporate values. If you hire people whose values are the same, then they're much more likely to be friends with each other, not just coworkers, or as we've seen, a lot of them end up dating each other or getting married.
I was just reading this morning, rereading your book after many, many years, and also came across the 10 core values again. And there were two which I thought were particularly interesting. There's one which is called create fun and a little weirdness. I'd love to talk about this weirdness with you. And then the second one was about be humble, which I also thought very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more? What do you mean with create fun and weirdness?
Yeah, I mean, I guess our belief is that everyone's a little weird somehow, and so it's really more just a fun way of saying we want everyone's true personalities and quirkiness or whatever to come out in the workplace, and so you get a visual representation of that just by walking around the office and seeing how people decorate their desks, and then it goes back to that same concept of we want you to be yourself as a human, not just as a number, not just as an employee. And then in terms of be humble, I think part of it was just, at least for me personally, people that are really egotistical, I also find annoying, and so we don't want the workplace to be annoying, and so that's part of it. But it's also, I think, it also happens to be a good business strategy in general. Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great, and then that book looked at why some companies, or what were the characteristics of companies that significantly outperformed their peer group, and then he came up with a list of, I forget how many, it was 10 companies that he profiled in that book. But then fast forward 10 years, 20 years, a lot of the companies that once were great are no longer even around. Circuit City being an example of one of them. And so then he wrote a follow-up book looking at how come there are these once great companies that are no longer relevant anymore, and I think the name of that follow-up book was How the Mighty Fall or How the Mighty Fail. And he examined those companies, and he found actually they all went through the exact same 5 stages in their way from being at the top of their game to disappearing. And one of the consistent steps in the beginning was that the companies lost their humbleness and thought that they could do no wrong and started believing in their own press releases. So I think it's both a good business strategy and also just makes working with people more enjoyable.
And what is it then, what are you doing and the teams, your employees are doing that you're not falling for the same trap, that you preserve your unique culture and that you're not losing it?
Yeah, so I guess I wouldn't say that the culture, preserve is probably the wrong word, because the culture itself is always evolving, and even between different departments you'll see slightly different cultures. And the way I think about core values, it's actually easier, rather than thinking of them as prescriptive of what to do, take the negative of them, and that's what not to do. And so using be humble, for example, if you take the opposite of it as don't be humble or be egotistical, well, don't do those things. But the way you don't do them, there still opens up a lot of room for different ways to manifest themselves as the company evolves or for a specific situation.
And what you're describing, so about the things which are done and not being done, of course they're done by people, by employees. So how do you ensure then that you find the right employees who fit to Zappos?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any company ever gets hiring 100% right. And I mean, we definitely have gotten better at it over time, but I think it's one of those things where as our recruiting team just over time and practice just slowly gets better at it. But the goal is to hire people whose values match the corporate values, and then you don't really have to prescribe behaviors, you just tell them, be yourself.
And how do you manage this balance? Because obviously, and what I understand, you focus very much on a cultural fit. Where you say, okay, we really look who fits with us, and we spend a lot of time to evaluate that. On the other hand, it's also about diversity. Diversity in thought, gender diversity, ethnicity diversity, whatever diversity there is, and controversy. So how do you manage this balance that on the one hand side you find people who can fit in your culture, but on the other side also maybe the ones who challenge that in a constructive manner?
I think the answer is different for different companies depending on their values. I think for us, we've essentially built diversity, this concept of diversity, into our core values. So I think between create fun and a little weirdness, that's a way of saying, almost by definition, you need diversity in order to think of something as being a little weird. And then also being humble, and then create a team and family spirit. I think a lot of the different things combined, being adventurous, creative, and open-minded, I think all of those are kind of different embodiments of diversity. But I can imagine another company maybe not having that built into their values, in which case they probably have to either, I guess they could either update their values or make that an additional explicit strategy statement or something.
What are the things you are passionate about?
I think it's all this stuff that we've talked about. I like just whether it's here at Ferguson's and just playing around with different spaces and then just seeing what energy of organic activity comes out of that. But same thing in the business environment at Zappos, creating all the right tools and infrastructure and training, and then letting employees go figure out how do you, maybe one day we'll have a Zappos Airlines or Zappos Bakery or Zappos anything, but it's not a vision coming from me saying here's a checklist of the 100 Zappos businesses. It's really about getting employees to tap into their passions, but then giving them the tools and training to maximize their chances of success. And then I think collectively I get inspired by their inspiration and their passions.
Was that also a reason why you introduced the concept of holacracy some years ago to empower your team members?
It's part of the reason. I mean, the press has maybe overemphasized holacracy itself a little bit too much, but really the long-term vision is it's all about self-organization, and probably the best example of self-organization at work successfully is in cities. And there's research that has shown every time the size of a city doubles, innovation or productivity per resident increases by 15%. And cities so not only do cities get more innovative and productive as they scale, they're also resilient, they stand the test of time, whereas companies don't last very long compared to cities, and they're likely to not be around. Most companies won't be around. I think the average lifetime of a company is 15 or 30 years, or maybe even some number less than that.
And how is it practiced, holacracy, at Zappos? Because there are a lot of rumors, like there are no job titles any longer, people not reporting into someone else any longer.
Well, there aren't job titles in the sense of, in a traditional hierarchy, it's a hierarchy of people, and so each position in the hierarchy has a title, and generally people only belong in one place in the hierarchy, and then depending on where you are, you have power over everything underneath you. Whereas with holacracy, there still is a hierarchy, but instead of a hierarchy of people, it's a hierarchy of circles or teams, and each circle. And so right now we have 1,500 employees and 500 circles, but employees can belong in multiple circles. And so, and then the other aspect of it is the circles can only essentially manage or dictate one level down or distribute resources one level down, and then it's up to that next circle to distribute it, whether you're talking about resources or policies and accountabilities and so on. Employees can move from circle to circle as long as the circle will have them, and so it's still a hierarchy, except the hierarchy of circles, each circle has its own purpose statement, so it's actually a hierarchy of purpose statements, and every circle their purpose statement is in service of the purpose statement of the circle above them, and then it all rolls up to what's known as the general company circle. And so that's kind of the first, I guess, base layer to help make forward progress towards self-organization. And now, on top of the philosophy, we're building market-based dynamics and tools associated with that. And ultimately, the goal is to maximize the autonomy that employees have and teams have. And so I would say that employees under Holacracy have much more autonomy than they did under the traditional hierarchical corporate structure, but under market-based dynamics, then it's going to be even more autonomy than before.
And is Zappos currently working the way you envisage it based on Holacracy? Are you happy with it? Would you say yes, it's what I envisaged 4 years ago when I introduced it, where I would be? Or do you feel you're behind, or you're ahead of it?
I think in general, probably with every entrepreneur, everything always takes longer than you'd like it to take. And so, yeah, if I had a magic wand, I wish everything moved twice as quickly or 4 times as quickly. But I think with 1,500 employees, any time there's a major change, from an expectation point of view, we figured it would take about 5 years to, and that's basically where we are now. And so it'll probably take another 5 years to kind of get this market-based dynamics layer built on top of it. But then I think once that's done, then the amount of change and adaptation is going to kind of increase exponentially. So it's really about taking the time to build the right platform.
Okay, so obviously a very big project, which is still a work in process. I know there's another very, very big project you've been super passionate about in the past few years, the Downtown project, to revitalize Las Vegas, to build a community. You even moved Zappos there in 2013. You've invested 350 million of your personal fortune to attract businesses, local businesses, startup, the tech community. There's a lot of art going on, a lot of music going on, a lot of events. So how is the project going after, when was it launched, 2012?
It's been, I think we're in year 6 now.
Year 6.
Yeah. So. And so, yeah, I think if you ask anyone walking down the street, there's definitely a lot more activity. And as I mentioned, when I first moved downtown, I think there were only 2 or 3 bars, and that was it. And it was kind of a dangerous area at the time, and so now for a project like Container Park, which is one of the projects that we worked on in Downtown Project, we've had over 5 million visitors, and including lots of kids and family. Whereas 5 years ago, I myself would have felt unsafe standing outside of what is now Downtown Container Park.
And how do you succeed in really integrating the community? I imagine it must not be easy if someone like you with a big vision, entrepreneurial background coming, great concepts, you probably can see how it could look like in 10 or 20 years. Others, I might imagine, thinking about city councils being more conservative, neighbors who've been living in a certain area for many, many years, they only know what they know, but they don't know what they're not knowing. So how do you bring all of that together? How do you convince people to buy into such a project?
I don't know if there's any easy way to convince people. I think our strategy has been find people that are innately entrepreneurial and are passionate about something that would also help make the neighborhood more walkable and bring more diversity to the neighborhood. And so if those things are true, and if it will also result in more collisions, meaning having people in the community more likely to run into each other, then that's something that we would consider funding. And so I think we've just taken a much more organic approach to it. It's not really top-down master plan. It's more, if someone has an idea for a cupcake bakery, then we look at basically, is it going to have, we have a few different things that ROC stands for. Is it return on capital? Is it going to be financially self-sustainable? And return on collisions, is it going to, for the amount of money invested, is it going to result in significantly more people running into each other around downtown? And return on community, is it going to, does the entrepreneur that we're funding care more about just their own business, but has a bias to be helpful and care about the community? So those are all things we've been looking for.
And do you also look at factors to assess for yourself if it's a success or not, like quality of life or community engagement, happiness of neighbors? Are there any surveys you would do and ask people, hey, how is it living here now? Or do you look at crime rate statistics? Is it now really a safer place?
Yeah, so I think if you go to downtownproject.com, there's a lot of the more formal economic statistics and so on there. But for me, it's really more just, since I live here, you can just feel the changes, and then also just hearing from visitors that maybe, friends for example, that maybe come once a year, and then hearing from them each year what the change feels like to them.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, there's the Downtown Project, there's Holacracy, Link Exchange, successful company you built. You've been a key driver with Zappos. There are many projects, initiatives you're looking after. So where do you take the energy from and your source of inspiration from to do all of that?
I think it's from all the different people involved, and like I said, it's not, whether it's the Downtown Project or where Zappos is going moving forward, it's not my vision. My vision is really just helping all of those visions come to life, and so each story that I hear, and just seeing the progress and seeing people do what maybe they themselves did not previously think they were capable of, like, all those things are super inspiring and energizing.
You know, with these many things, or also things in general in life, if you look at it, looking back the past 40 plus years, what are the things you're most proud of?
I'd say my friends. Just got a great, I don't know if you want to call it a tribe or a group of friends, and yeah, I feel super lucky to be living here with a lot of them, but just, yeah, that's probably the main thing.
So friendship is the thing, community?
Yeah, so, but kind of, I mean, I guess it depends on what scale you're thinking of a community, but I'd say the community of friends, and I love introducing people to them, and then, you know, well, you're going to be staying here for a few days, and usually when people leave, they talk about how much they enjoyed meeting the people in the community, and how going back home, it actually maybe affected their outlook on life a little, and helped them reevaluate some of the priorities they have.
We've just talked about, Tony, how much you've been doing so far, the many achievements you had, but I would expect that your way, the way you evolved over life, there was not only always successes, there also were failures or misses. Could you share maybe one of the key moments of your life or the key failures with us? What happened and what did you take out of that with you?
Yeah, well, I think with Link Exchange, the first company that I co-founded with a college roommate back in 1996, when we sold it in 1998, the company culture had gone completely downhill. And we talked about how I didn't look forward to going into the office anymore. And so I think with Zappos, that was the big reason that culture is so important to us, is because I didn't want to make that same mistake again. And then I'd say the other category of biggest mistakes is probably in hiring. And if you add up all the bad hires we've made at Zappos and the bad hires that those bad hires made and bad decisions they made, it's definitely cost the company well over $100 million in mistakes. And so I don't think any company will ever get hiring perfect, but that's definitely the biggest category of mistakes.
And is that also something you would mention to entrepreneurs, to young startup builders? Because you're so engaged with them, you're so passionate about them. Would that then also be the advice you would give to them? Or?
Yeah, I would say in general, I think especially for startups, they're always looking to hire quickly. And so the instinct is to hire quickly, and then everyone, I think, kind of drags their feet firing people, when really it should be the reverse: hire slowly and fire quickly.
Anything else besides hiring and culture, where you see specific needs for startups versus bigger organization where they should focus a little bit more on?
I think, that's actually a lot of the stuff that moving forward we're focusing on at Zappos, is to provide those services, because I'd say most startups and small businesses, when they're in the first couple of years, probably spend at least half their time doing stuff that's necessary, but not really uniquely differentiating for their startup, whether that means dealing with lawyers or finance or legal or setting up IT or so on. And so a lot of that is actually stuff that we're looking to, we've had that experience and we've built it for ourselves at Zappos, and so if we can externalize those services, then it's something that could be a win-win. It saves the new startups and small businesses time. It becomes additional revenue for Zappos, and so it's somewhat analogous to AWS for Amazon. Mm-hmm. AWS was originally built or came about because Amazon needed content delivery services on the IT side, and when they externalized it, that enabled lots of startups like Instagram to really get started with much lower costs.
Tony, for the end of our interview, I would have two more personal questions. So currently there's so many things, as always, but we have the impression maybe currently it's a lot going on in our world. Political, economically, are there things you're a little bit worried about, you're a little bit concerned about, that you feel they're not going in the right direction?
In the world?
Yeah.
I think I've always been concerned about what's going to happen once AI or super AI gets to a certain point, and then and I don't think it's necessarily because AI is evil, but I think that if it isn't, if the parameters aren't set correctly, there could be unintended consequences. And I think it was a year or two ago where Microsoft released an AI-powered Twitter account, and then very quickly, I think it was within 24 or 48 hours, the Twitter account became racist and they had to take it down. And that's just one small example. And so if you actually hook AI up to something that's more powerful than Twitter that can have much more disastrous consequences.
Okay. And looking more again and finishing our interview on a positive note, looking a little bit more on the dreams of Tony Hsieh, is there anything left? You've achieved so many things. Is there anything you would like still to achieve in life? So any accomplishments you're striving for?
Yeah, I think what we're working on right now at Zappos in terms of what we're calling market-based dynamics is pretty interesting, and if we can build a platform not just for ourselves but externalize it, and I guess I view it as analogous to how AWS enabled a whole different class of startups to come about, or how the standardization of shipping container sizes made shipping worldwide grow at an exponential rate once there was standardization. So if we could do an analogous thing to that, I think it could help enable a whole class of entrepreneurs that maybe otherwise would not have either thought of it, or maybe would not have been successful because they would have wasting all their time reinventing the wheel.
So thank you very much, Tony. That was very insightful and very stimulating. Much appreciated that you've been our guest today at S-Talk. Thank you.